They will remain completely oblivious to the exact moment you invaded their subconscious, yet they will find their mind relentlessly colonized by your presence. You will bend their choices to your will and sculpt their emotions like wet clay. While Machiavelli may not have explicitly used the word obsession, he mapped its geography perfectly. The great strategist wrote that men are driven by two primary currents, love and fear. However, there exists a third, far more potent undercurrent, total fixation. Obsession transcends simple attraction. It is fundamentally about dominion. When a target becomes truly obsessed with you, it is not a matter of mere fondness. They begin to restructure their entire existence to orbit around yours. You become their first thought at dawn. They subconsciously alter their cadence, their wardrobe, and their behavior simply to align with what they perceive as your desires. This state of mind can be engineered with precision. So how do you construct this reality? You apply the same ruthlessness Machiavelli used to manipulate monarchs. He grasped one cardinal rule. True obsession is never sparked by what you purely give. It is ignited by what you strategically withhold. If your goal is to occupy someone's mind completely, you must resist the urge to inundate them with your attention. Do not be perpetually available. Excessive availability breeds complacency, and comfort is the assassin of curiosity. Instead, adopt the strategist's approach, starve them of certainty. Obsession takes root in the void where the mind cannot predict your next move. Keep them perpetually guessing whether you hold them in high regard or are merely tolerating their existence. Let them wonder if your last lingering look was born of genuine passion or cold, detached calculation. This calculated emotional starvation traps them in a repetitive cognitive loop because the human brain finds unsolved puzzles intolerable. You transform yourself into that enigma by allowing silence to stretch well past the point of comfort, and by responding to their digital summons just late enough to induce a spike of anxiety. You must master the art of receding exactly when they attempt to lean in closer. Machiavelli never offered a complete answer, never pledged total allegiance, and never granted the populace the security they begged for. He knew that the moment certainty arrives, the thrill of the chase evaporates. It is uncertainty that fuels the flames. Once you have primed their interest through calculated absence and silence, you engage in mirroring, but never fully. You must reveal only fragments of the reflection they seek. Offer just enough resonance for them to think, "Finally, this person truly understands my soul," but never offer enough for them to feel they have deciphered your code. The strategist called this tactical reflection. You mirror their deepest hungers, but only in lethal controlled doses. If they desire ambition, you unveil a glimpse of a ruthless empire builder, then shadow it immediately. If they crave vulnerability, you expose a single crack in the armor, only to instantly seal it with a deflective joke. If they want intensity, burn them with it for a second, then retreat into an icy, impenetrable calm. The psyche does not fixate on what it fully comprehends. It obsesses over what it almost grasps but cannot quite hold. Now that you have hooked their interest and they are attempting to decode your behavior, you commence the conditioning process of their mind. In behavioral psychology, this is known as intermittent reinforcement. You alternate between radiating warmth and projecting a cold void. Offer them high praise, followed immediately by sharp criticism. Draw them into your intimate circle, then vanish without explanation. Repeat this irregularity. This generates a volatile dopamine loop within their neural pathways. They will compulsively check their devices, dissecting your syntax and overanalyzing your silence because you have effectively hijacked their neurochemical reward system. They become like the gambler at the slot machine, pulling the lever, desperate for the jackpot, never knowing if the next hit will create a win. You are not peddling love. You are selling the possibility of it. And hope, once weaponized, is an addiction far more potent than consistent affection ever could be. Machiavelli understood a dark truth that few dare to admit. The deepest obsessions are not born of pleasure. They are forged in the alleviation of pain, the kind that is already there. Most people navigate the world carrying a silent, festering wound, be it abandonment, rejection, or deep-seated insecurity. You do not need to inflict this trauma. You simply position yourself as the sole entity capable of soothing it. You listen without attempting to fix. You validate their darkness without moral judgment. You gaze directly into the abyss they conceal from the rest of the world. Gradually, you position yourself not merely as another person, but as the antidote. They begin to need you because your presence stops being a preference and starts feeling like a cure. Once a subject internalizes that belief, departure becomes impossible. They are tethered to you. However, if you ever explicitly demand obsession, attention, or loyalty, you shatter the spell. True psychological dominance is never requested. It is provoked. Let your absence thunder louder than your presence ever could. Let your calculated indifference sharpen the edge of their desire. Allow your volatile unpredictability to drive their imagination to the brink of madness. Machiavelli never begged for fealty. He rendered himself so enigmatic, so intellectually inaccessible, that power was surrendered to him voluntarily. You do not command them to obsess. You embody the obsession itself. They are desperate to define who you are, but you must deny them that satisfaction because the moment they label you, they lose the impulse to chase you. The strategist never provided the period at the end of the sentence. He did not wish to be known. He wished to be mythologized. You must learn to occupy the landscape of their fantasies more than their physical reality. Never present a static, fossilized version of your character. Predictability is the death knell of fascination. Obsession blooms in the fertile ground of paradox, in the friction between the cryptic and the familiar, the frost and the fire, the sovereignty and the surrender. Today, you're the embodiment of laser-focused intensity. Tomorrow you are whimsical and unreachable. One moment you adore them, the next you mock them. This forces them to question reality. Which version is the mask did I transgress? They become addicted to the labyrinth of your personality. You owe them no consistency. You owe them a maze without an exit, and they will wander its corridors indefinitely if you refuse to hand them the map. Do you wish to control a subject without physical constraints? Master the art of temporal presence. Machiavelli knew that power lies in the timing of your arrival and the abruptness of your departure. Here is the tactical application of timing. Sever the connection at the peak of engagement. Leave a profound conversation hanging in the air. Send a message that makes them feel deeply seen, then vanish into the ether. Then simply vanish. Go radio silent for 8 solid hours. The trick is to execute your exit precisely when the energy between you peaks. Always walk away while the iron is hot, leaving them desperate for just one more second. You need to carve out a silence so profound it deafens them. In that vacuum, their mind begins to race with questions, and their heart creates a primal fear, a fear of loss that tightens its grip on their chest. You have now successfully colonized their thoughts. Rent-free mental occupation. Let's talk about mirroring a seductive classic that amateurs constantly bungle. They assume it is merely mimicking posture or parroting phrases. Wrong. You must hold a mirror to their internal landscape, but keep the glass slightly warped. Articulate the emotions they have carried for years, but lacked the vocabulary to define. Observe the nuances and shadows they were convinced remained invisible to the rest of the world. Validating them is not enough. You must make them feel deeply recognized, yet subtly misinterpreted. This compels them to chase you, to over-explain desperately, trying to correct the portrait you have painted of them. But here is the catch: you are not actually wrong. You're simply tantalizingly close to the truth without hitting the bullseye. That almost is the hook that buries itself in their psyche. They feel a compulsion to complete the narrative, to adjust the reflection, but they never will because you will never grant them that satisfaction. If it is common, it is worthless. If it is easily acquired, it is treated with indifference. You're building an obsession here. You must curate an aura of extreme rarity. Machiavelli understood a fundamental truth: humans deify what they cannot easily possess. Therefore, you must engineer scarcity in every facet of your existence. Your time must never be an open commodity. Keep your inner monologue guarded. Dole out validation like diamonds, not water. Your focus must remain fickle and impossible to forecast. Force them to pay a psychological tax for every interaction. True obsession is not born from availability. It is forged through the struggle of earned proximity. They are not falling in love with you as a person. They are intoxicated by the exclusivity of being selected by you. Once they taste that status, they will wage war to ensure they are never cast aside. You do not construct obsession with warmth. You build it with subtraction. The moment intimacy begins to bloom, you must pull back. Right when they believe they have decoded your cipher, evaporate. The second they settle into comfort, you must seismically shift the ground beneath their feet. Inflicting calculated microscopic emotional cuts yields a permanent scar on the memory. However, your withdrawal must never appear malicious or cruel. The goal is absolute bewilderment. You do not want them to loathe you. You want them to ache for you. Drive them to dissect every syllable they uttered, wondering where they went wrong. This is the critical juncture where the obsession metastasizes. It ceases to be about your actions and shifts entirely to their internal state. It becomes about how they perceive their own worth in the vacuum of your absence. Every icon in history commanded a signature, a specific scent, a unique turn of phrase, a calculated movement. These minute sensory hooks bury themselves deep within the subconscious mind, waiting to be triggered. You must engineer the same effect. Adopt a verbal idiom exclusive to you, a drop in vocal register when you speak of serious matters, or a hand movement that commands attention. This is the psychic fingerprint you leave behind. Soon, they will hallucinate your essence in strangers on the street and hear your cadence in the quiet. This is the alchemy of transforming from a mere person into an inescapable presence, from human to haunting. To ignite true obsession, they must recognize their own reflection in your eyes and see traces of you in their own soul. You cease to be a separate entity. You weave yourself into the very fabric of their self-perception. This is the masterstroke of Machiavelli. He did not merely offer counsel. He infiltrated their decision-making architecture, their deepest insecurities, and their vanity. He became the internal narrator, guiding their every move. Understand this: people do not obsess over other people. They obsess over the idealized version of themselves that exists only in your company. Therefore, when you are present, you must act as an amplifier, making them feel more potent, completely deciphered, and intensely coveted. Subtly, you graft your values onto theirs. Position yourself as the anomaly. You perceive the nuances the herd overlooks. You're revealing a superior iteration of their character that remains dormant with anyone else. Consequently, the moment they step out of your orbit, they feel a diminishment, a sudden loss of color and vitality, and they will inevitably return not for you, but to reclaim the godlike feeling they possess when you are near. You must assign them a potent role in your narrative. Once the hook is set and they are seeking your validation, bestow upon them a specific designation. Use lines like, "You are the only person who truly deciphers this complexity in me," or "My trust is a fortress, yet with you the gates are open." This solidifies their status as the chosen one. To sever ties with you would mean murdering that superior identity. That is the mechanics of obsession. You are the mirror reflecting their glory back at them. Humans defend their ego mirrors with violent intensity. As Machiavelli famously dictated, men must either be caressed or annihilated. To secure absolute emotional allegiance, you must become the keeper of their darkest skeletons. Yet you never demand these confessions. You create a vacuum of silence so profound and devoid of judgment that the truth spills out of them involuntarily. When they pour out their traumas, their failures, and their shame, do not offer platitudes. Simply witness it. That stoic acceptance creates a sanctuary they cannot find elsewhere. You become the vault. A subtle dread forms that their secrets might decay or be exposed if they leave. That anxiety transmutes into a fierce attachment. When masterfully orchestrated, that attachment hardens into obsession through the art of memory manipulation. You are not merely curating your present image. You are retroactively editing the past, rewriting your history together by reframing shared experiences. Do you recall the way you looked at me when I said that was the exact second everything shifted? As we passed that spot, I could feel the internal war you were waging. Even if that battle never happened, the suggestion plants the seed until they believe it as fact. The human brain is malleable. It rewires itself based on high-emotion state suggestion and repetition. In their mind, you grow more mythical, more intense. You have crashed into their life narrative like a plot twist they were blind to, but now cannot escape. Remember, obsession withers when the story concludes. Construct a shared mythology, but leave the final chapter unwritten. Describe vivid futures and destinations you will conquer together, keeping the horizon forever just out of reach. Construct a vividly detailed fantasy in their mind, then simply evaporate. You're essentially crafting a campaign promise similar to a cunning politician. It offers a dazzling vision of hope, but comes with zero guarantees of fulfillment. That calculated ambiguity sinks its claws deep into their psyche, becoming a mental hook they cannot dislodge. They start looping tortured questions like, what if we actually made that happen? What if they were my soulmate, and I let them slip through my fingers? The narrative never reaches a conclusion. It remains suspended in the ether, acting as a gravity well that drags them back to your memory the instant their reality feels mundane, cold, or lonely. You are no longer just a person. You are the architect who altered their life's trajectory. You become a glitch in their history that is obsessively replayed and remembered. To lock this obsession in permanently, you must introduce one final volatile element into the mixture: fear. Not a screaming terror, but a creeping anxiety, a soft, suffocating dread of losing you forever. The moment their terror of your absence outweighs the pleasure of your presence, the heavy lifting is done. They will seduce themselves. Machiavelli understood that direct threats are clumsy and unnecessary. He simply mastered the art of exclusion, ensuring that the true horror was the mere thought of being cast out of his inner circle. When a target realizes that your focus is a finite resource that could vanish at any second, they clutch it tighter. Execute this with nuance. Right after a peak moment of intimacy, take a half step back. Drop into silence immediately following a deep connection. This maneuver doesn't breed resentment or hate. It breeds pure adrenaline-fueled panic. Their inner monologue will fracture into self-doubt. Did I ruin the moment? Am I boring them? You have effectively flipped the script, convincing them that they are the volatile variable in the equation. They internalize the belief that the burden of maintenance lies with them. They will exhaust themselves holding the door open, terrified you might lock it. Human beings do not fear losing what they do not value. Therefore, your strategy is to hand them a holy grail, but only let them hold it for a second, just long enough to feel chosen, unique, and intoxicated. Consequently, if you walk away now, they aren't merely losing a partner. They are being stripped of an elite privilege and status. Human psychology is hardwired to fiercely defend against the loss of status. You must dispense your loyalty as if it were a vintage wine costing thousands of dollars. Offer a meager sip occasionally, perhaps a celebratory toast, but never surrender the entire bottle. They will become addicted to the taste and live in constant dread of the drought. Every human being is sprinting away from a deep-seated insecurity. Your role is to position yourself as the sole magician capable of banishing that demon, but only on your schedule. When you validate them, making them feel invincible and understood, they neurologically link safety to your face. However, the moment you strategically withdraw their demons, come rushing back. The equation becomes simple in their mind. You equal peace. You transform into the only barrier standing between them and their crushing self-doubt. This triggers profound emotional dependency. They aren't addicted to your love or your words. They are addicted to the superior version of themselves that only exists when you are in the room. Suddenly, the prospect of your departure is physically painful. Do not mistake this for romance. It is terror wearing the mask of deep attachment. Most people dread rejection because of the finality, but uncertainty is maddening. If they suspect you might drift away, their survival instincts kick into overdrive. But if you frame the potential breakup as a consequence of their inadequacy, they won't just panic. They will double their efforts to fix themselves for you. Never blatantly threaten to dump them. Instead, plant subtle seeds of doubt with phrases like, "I have always been so captivatingly drawn to your emotional resilience." Follow that with, "I just pray you don't turn out like the rest of the crowd. People rarely lose me because I walk away. They lose me because they forget how rare of a commodity I am." You aren't pushing them away with this rhetoric. You're conditioning them to be petrified of pushing you away. Mere attraction is replaced by a desperate need to keep you. They start protecting your relationship as if it were fragile bullion in a vault. Once you have woven yourself into their nostalgia and self-concept, you ascend to the role of their moral compass. You begin to steer their life choices with barely a whisper. Use disappointed affirmations like, "You're better than that," or "That behavior doesn't align with the person I know you to be." Recoil just enough to make them question if they have forfeited your esteem. The dynamic shifts. They stop chasing your affection. They begin hunting for your moral approval. If you hold the keys to a person's self-image, you effectively own them completely. You can simply put your phone down, and the chaos ensues 3 frantic texts, scrolling through chat history and forensic analysis of your final sentence. Machiavelli would advise doing absolutely nothing, for silence screams louder than any defense. You have addicted them to the chaotic rhythm of your unpredictability. They become fixated on repairing a breach that never existed. In reality, they are chasing their own tail, fueled by a neurochemical loop of obsession. Maintain a calculated distance, always within eyesight, yet eternally just out of arm's reach. Obsession is a fire that requires constant oxygen. Nothing stokes that flame like a masterfully timed disappearance. Your influence actually expands and solidifies in the vacuum of your absence. The strategist knows that the second you exit the stage, the audience projects their fantasies onto you, making you larger than life. You cease to be the chaser. You become the haunting void in the room. This isn't about blocking numbers or ghosting like an amateur. It is a slow, deliberate erosion of presence. Introduce a lag in your response times. Dial back the emotional temperature by 10 degrees. Never explain why. If they panic and ask, feign total oblivion. "Everything is fine. I've just been lost in thought." This non-answer forces them to internalize the blame. Did I come on too strong? Am I simply insufficient? That self-interrogation is the engine of obsession. While you fade, do not vanish completely. Leave behind psychological landmines. A specific song you curated a coffee shop corner, you claimed a unique turn of phrase they now hear in every conversation. This is the art of becoming a specter, haunting their mundane reality. Their brain rushes to fill the silence, and eventually, their own imagination begins to speak to them in your voice. Fixation requires friction to survive. Leave faint fingerprints, view their digital stories religiously, but refuse to engage. Drop a single like on a photo, but never send a text. Deploy a cryptic message with zero context, then plunge back into radio silence. These calculated breadcrumbs reignite the agonizing hope that you are still thinking of them. That sliver of hope keeps them dragging themselves through an emotional wasteland, begging for a single drop of acknowledgement. You have transcended being a person of desire. You have become the solution to their suffering. You have engineered a state of severe emotional dehydration, and you are the only water source left on Earth. When you finally emerge from the shadows after a strategic period of absolute radio silence, do not make the mistake of returning as the version of yourself they remember. You must reappear reborn, detached, and fundamentally altered. You return with a temperature that has dropped significantly colder, intellectually sharper, and radiating a level of self-control that borders on the unnatural while treating them with a clinical precision rather than emotional investment. The softness they once took for granted has evaporated, replaced by a tangible distance they will immediately sense. Panic will set in as they scramble to reclaim the access and warmth they once possessed, unaware that those privileges have been permanently revoked. However, you must never allow them to fully grasp you again. Through subtle inflections in your tone and precise, calculated behaviors, you signal a terrifying truth. While you are physically present, the connection has irrevocably mutated. Paradoxically, this calculated withdrawal skyrockets your value in their eyes, causing them to stop interacting with the reality of who you are in the moment and begin a desperate pursuit of the memory of who you used to be. Human psychology is flawed in that people will exhaust themselves chasing the ghosts of a past where they felt safe and validated. They will try every trick in the book to elicit a reaction, but nothing will work because you have positioned yourself behind an impenetrable wall of indifference. At this stage, realize that their pursuit is no longer about affection for you. They are chasing a chemical fix, a desperate need for relief from the anxiety and insecurity they have developed in your absence. They find themselves ensnared in a psychological loop of their own construction, a labyrinth built from the bricks of your silence, your intermittent warmth, your sudden withdrawals, and your calculated returns. You provided them with just enough of a taste of paradise to render their mundane reality completely unbearable, without you elevating yourself from a mere human to a legendary figure in their mind, an archetype they cannot replace. Now begin the active construction of your personal mythology. When you speak of your history, use poetic, ambiguous language that invites interpretation rather than giving facts. Encouraging others to describe you as mysterious, formidable, and completely unreadable. Adopt a policy of absolute non-defensiveness. Never stoop to clarify rumors or correct misconceptions, but instead let the masses argue over your character while you remain above the fray, observing their confusion with amusement. The moment you have a third party defending your reputation to others, you have won. That defender has transitioned from a friend to a high priest of your cult, an integral part of the myth you are building rather than just a peer who knew you. You evolve into a living narrative, a story they are compelled to repeat. Remember that stories outlive memories and myths outlive men. So it is time to leverage this power just as Machiavelli understood that to be obeyed, one must first be revered. Obsession is not just an emotion, it is a resource. If sculpted with precision and patience, it transforms into the purest, most unbreakable form of control available to the human psyche. When an individual's sense of self-worth becomes inextricably tied to your approval, their desire shifts from wanting you to needing to prove their worth to you, creating a dynamic where they will perform tasks and offer loyalty without you ever having to voice a request. A person in the throes of obsession is in a constant state of hypervigilance, endlessly scanning your behavior for signs of validation or rejection, desperate to close the gap you created. You must weaponize this need by dispensing validation not based on affection or love, but strictly based on loyalty and submission. You are not rewarding their feelings, you are reinforcing their alignment with your will. When they echo your beliefs, you provide warmth. When they adhere to your unspoken rules, you open up. When they show appreciation for your hierarchy, you grant them understanding. This is operant conditioning in its most elegant form. They will internalize a new mantra. The more I act in accordance with what pleases this person, the more whole I feel, which solidifies a behavioral loyalty that is deep-seated and difficult to break. Once this baseline is established, raise the standards using only silence. Demonstrate through your energy alone that your presence requires a higher level of conduct, a vibration that they must rise to meet. Demand emotional stoicism, elegance under immense pressure, and unwavering loyalty without ever speaking a word. These are not requests, they are the price of admission to your reality. You do not explain these expectations, you simply embody them. Watching you, they will begin to self-correct, pruning away parts of their personality that do not fit your mold because the fear of losing you outweighs the pain of changing themselves. This is the methodology for creating invisible laws that govern a relationship. You do not rule through punishment or loud decrees, but through the selective application of warmth and the terrifying threat of the cold. Mere romantic obsession is fleeting and surface level, but an obsession that is rooted in a shared ideology or worldview is robust, resilient, and can last a lifetime. Ask yourself what uncomfortable, elegant truths define your existence. Perhaps that the majority of people are too fragile to lead, that loyalty is not a gift, but a wage earned, or that silence is often a more truthful communicator than speech. Introduce these axioms into conversation casually, as if they are universal laws. If they nod in agreement, they have already begun the process of reshaping their core values to mirror yours. This transformation happens not because you forced it, but because they admire the strength of your conviction. They stop being obsessed with possessing you and start being obsessed with becoming like you. You must position yourself as the living answer to a burning existential question they do not even have the vocabulary to ask. Becoming the solution to their internal confusion. The average person navigates life with gaping psychological voids, a desperate desire to feel dangerous, a craving to be truly seen, a hunger for significance. And you do not fill these voids directly, but rather acknowledge their depth. You craft a potent illusion that you and only you possess the key to their psyche, making the prospect of leaving you feel akin to spiritual death, and ensuring that even if they try to walk away, the tether holds. Any relationship they attempt after yours will feel tragically shallow, colorless, and empty, because you were not just a partner to them, you were an experience, an event that rewrote their standards. You were a doorway to a superior version of themselves, a version they preferred, and then you quietly closed that door. Machiavelli never commanded people directly. He maneuvered them until they believed his will was their own idea. You must learn to plant ideas like seeds in the fertile soil of their insecurities, then water them slowly with strategic praise, always remaining one tactical step ahead of their realization. Demonstrate that you see through the facades that fool others, convincing them that aligning with you is a sign of superior intelligence, and that pleasing you is an act of strength, not submission. In the end, they will believe that their devotion was their own discovery, which is the highest art of control dominance without resistance, where you cease to be just a person in their narrative. You transcend your humanity to become a symbol of what you represent, no longer viewed as a flawed human being, but mythologized by your own design into something untouchable. The old masters knew that fear and awe are most effective when the source feels slightly inhuman, slightly out of reach, so you must maintain your distance and speak with deliberate scarcity. Allow mystery to take the place of explanation. You're no longer merely a participant in their life, you're the architect situated above it. You do not need to be in the light to lead. True power dictates the movement of the pieces from the shadows.